Hello everyone, today I'm getting back to the bread and butter of my channel, helping people figure out how the heck to build a gaming PC. So today marks the return of my monthly build series, where I go over parts lists because one of the most challenging things about building a PC is figuring out what parts you should build with. In years past, the starter build that I've recommended for people is a few tiers above the most basic budget system you can put together. And in years past, that budget build was maybe around the $900 price point. Prices have gone up, unfortunately, due to supply chain issues and inflation, but we can still recommend an extremely powerful gaming PC for around $1,200 to $1,300, so let's get started.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by Micro Center. This is one of my favorite places to buy PC parts. So if you're building or upgrading your PC, I highly recommend making your way down to one of their 25 retail stores in the US. They have consistently competitive prices and an excellent selection of PC hardware and other tech goodies. And they have a custom PC builder on the Micro Center website. Use it to spec out your rig and it will show you parts in store at your nearest location while ensuring compatibility. Then you can pick up in store or have their pros assemble it for you. So click the sponsor link in the description to find a Micro Center near you. A couple quick notes before I go over the parts list. I'm not building a system today, so if you're interested in that, check out my How to Build a PC Beginners Tutorial playlist, where I have my refreshed for 2023 How to Build a PC series, as well as a bunch of other helpful videos. And if you're not interested in my explanation for why I chose the parts that we're gonna go over today, you can jump right to the video subscription. They're all listed there, as well as links to where you can buy them. And yes, those are affiliate links. But let's get right into it with the main build. This is an AM5 build, so we're going with an AMD processor, and we're running the RX 7800 XT. So we're also using an AMD Radeon GPU. That is one of the best bang for the buck GPUs that has come out this year. It is $500, hence the increased base price from around maybe $900 to $1,000 a couple years back to around $1,200 to $1,300 for this build. Other than that, we have 32 gigs of DDR5 memory. DDR5 prices have come way down, which is why it's easier to recommend the AM5 platform these days, especially with the potential upgrade path, because AMD has promised to support this platform through 2025. We have a B650 chipset motherboard that's not too crazy expensive, but that still gives you the ability to overclock. We have a nice Fantex case for 80 bucks. It includes 3 RGB fans. We have a 2 terabyte NVMe SSD. Prices on NVMe SSDs have come way down, so that's really nice. And a 750 watt power supply, and that gives you the flexibility to upgrade things like your graphics card down the line if you want to drop in an upgraded unit that requires more power. So starting with the CPU, we have a Ryzen 5 7600. Note the core and thread count. We're going with the 6-core, 12-thread processor, and for an entry to mid-level gaming GPU, 6 cores and 12 threads is just fine, although you might consider upgrading. I do have some options for that. But about $220 for the 7600 gets you both the CPU and a stock cooler, and that's another way you can save some money and get yourself up and running, is running the stock cooler right out of the gate, and you can potentially upgrade that down the line, or maybe you're just fine with the stock cooler. Stock coolers are perfectly adequate. If you do want to run an aftermarket cooler though, check out the 7600X, or the CPUs that have an X on the end, like this one right here. Note the thinner box, because this one does not come with a stock CPU cooler, so you will need to add that on. So even though the price for this is roughly the same, thanks to this $20 promo code that's available on Newegg right now, that's gonna bring the price down to $230, or just $10 more than the 7600. But since you don't have a cooler, you'll need to add one on. I have several options for about 35 bucks these days, so that brings the price of the CPU and the cooler, if you go with the 7600X, to about $265. Of course, there are lots of CPUs that work on AM5, including the Ryzen 7 7700, which basically gives you 8 cores and 16 threads, so 2 more cores, 4 more threads, but it does cost $100 more. Just like the 7600, the 7700 comes with a stock cooler, and that'll work just fine to get yourself started. But again, you have the 7700X that you can potentially switch to as well. And make sure you check both versions if you're shopping for CPUs, because deals come and go. Right now there's a $25 off promo code for the 7700X at Newegg that brings the price down to $325, which you might note is actually cheaper than what the 7700 is going for right now. Of course, you'll have to add a cooler here as well, so that'll bring the cost of the CPU and the cooler to about $360 for the 7700X. And then again, speaking of upgrade path, or for those who just might want a little bit more CPU horsepower right out of the gate, we have the 7800X 3D. This is quite literally one of the best CPUs for gaming across all the CPUs that are out there on the market. So for $450, it's a bit of a price increase, but again, we've got a $64 off promo code right now that brings the price down to about $385. But again, yes, you'll need an aftermarket cooler for this. But fortunately, we have some really nice aftermarket air coolers, and I've chosen a selection from Thermalright. We have the Thermalright Silver Soul 135. That's about $35, and you can typically find this one pretty much all the time at this price. But do check out their Peerless Assassin as well. It doesn't have the black finish across the fins, but it does have it across the top. And this one is a 2-fan cooler, and it also has very excellent performance. So for $35, I'd opt for this over the Silver Soul. Or hey, maybe add some RGB because the Peerless Assassin 120 SE ARGB is also $35. So, and that's available both at Newegg and at Amazon right now. For the graphics card for this build, I'm recommending the 7800 XT. It's $500. It is a current generation graphics card that's going to get you a few more features and capabilities than you might get if you're going with, say, a used option. But NVIDIA doesn't really have any like new for sale graphics cards right now at the $500 price point that really compete with the 7800 XT. You might find a deal on like an RTX 4070 or something like that, but even that only has a 12 gig VRAM buffer, whereas this one has 16. But just as NVIDIA graphics cards can be overpriced, also check out the prices on the 7800 XTs because the price should be $500. There are quite a few that are selling for more than that, even some getting close to $600. At that point, I'd say yes, very much look at the 4070, but for $500, it's really tough to beat the 7800 XT right now. So the one I'm going with today is this unit from Sapphire because it is available right now for $500. But since inventory can fluctuate a little bit, I would recommend reality checking your price before you make the purchase. The CPU and the GPU are going to be what have the most impact on your system's overall performance, but the rest of the parts are important too, and the motherboard is definitely one that ties everything together. And my list today features the GIGABYTE B650 Gaming X-AX, which is about $180 right now, and this one has been marked down. It was originally $200 to $220. It is nice when you can find a motherboard that has the features you need without being crazy expensive, and this one has some stuff like built-in Wi-Fi, which is nice to have. It has a good and adequate power delivery system as well as some cooling for the VRMs. It has stuff like a USB 3.2 Gen 2 front panel header for connectivity with your case, as well as a fixed I/O shield, which is nice to have, and a decent complement of M.2 slots, 3 of them total. You will need DDR5 memory if you're going AM5, and fortunately you can get a 32 gig kit, which is what I would recommend as a starter right now. That's 2 16 gig sticks. This kit was $85. It looks like the price has gone up by $8 or so since I first looked this up this morning. But those are the specs you want. DDR5, of course, 32 gigs or 2 by 16 gigs. I would say DDR5 6000 speed is the speed you should be going for. Look for the lowest CAS latency you can get with those specs otherwise. Please note that you do not need RGB in your DDR5 memory. Yes, there is that saying that the RGB makes your system faster, but we're gonna have RGB elsewhere in the system. So in my opinion, it's not worth spending an extra $15 or $20 just for a kit with RGB. And lastly, I would say a kit that has expo settings like G.Skill's Flare lineup is a good option to go with as well if you're building on AM5. The case we're working with is going to be the Fantex Eclipse G300A. This case is actually available for $60. I've even seen it for $50 for the version that comes with a single fan, but for an extra $10 to $15, this one comes with a triple fan setup. They are ARGB as well, which is nice. It currently has a $10 mail-in rebate, which brings the price down a little bit, but you may or may not count that depending on how keen you are on filling out mail-in rebate forms. But we've got a tempered glass side panel, full-size ATX layout, and some nice features such as a power supply basement down here and dust filtration where it's needed. You're gonna want storage, and for storage, 2 terabyte NVMe SSDs have come way down in price. You used to have to pay upwards of $100 even for like a kind of a mid-tier Gen 3 drive. The Team Group MP34 is definitely a mid-tier Gen 3 drive, but it does have reasonable read and write speeds at 3,500 and 2,900 megabytes per second respectively. And $70 for 2 terabytes is just really nice. So there you have that. And if you do want to upgrade to, say, a PCIe Gen 4 drive, definitely check to make sure you're getting a Gen 4 drive that's actually making use of those speeds. There are drives that are rated for a Gen 4 connection, but if they're still only topping out at about 3,000 to 3,500 megabytes per second reads and writes, they're not actually saturating the Gen 4 bandwidth. You've got to go above that to hit Gen 4 speeds. This one's not the fastest Gen 4 drive, but it's still about 5 gigabytes per second reads, about 4.2 gigabytes per second writes. This is the MSI M461, by the way. So for about a $10, maybe $15 premium over the Gen 3 drive, I'd say at $80, this one is a good deal as well, although that is a mail-in rebate price. Lastly, we will need to power the system. Power supply prices, unfortunately, aren't quite as good as like the M.2 NVMe SSD prices, but you can still get a nice 750 watt, even fully or partially modular power supply for around $80. This is the Rosewell Hive series. Rosewell power supplies have been a little hit and miss in the past, but this one actually is a pretty decently built unit. It does have all black cabling as well. It's 80+ bronze rated for efficiency, and again, modularity is a nice feature to have in a power supply. If you want a little bit more efficiency, then we have a Thermaltake Tough Power 750 watt unit right here, 80+ gold rated, so a little bit more efficient. It is $90, but that is a straight up price. And if you are keen on mail-in rebates, I found several power supplies that have really good mail-in rebates right now. It's just hard for me to say, yes, buy this $150 power supply, you guys, because it has a $75 mail-in rebate, because mail-in rebates, not everyone always redeems them. That's why manufacturers like mail-in rebates. So going back to our overall price list, if you're going for the less expensive components that I've recommended today, you can get by for maybe just over $1,200, $1,215. But if you swap in for like the 7700X, for example, getting yourself 8 cores instead of 6, as well as an aftermarket CPU cooler, as well as upgrading maybe your NVMe SSD and your power supply, then you're gonna get yourself a little bit closer to $1,400, although there are some tangible upgrades by spending an extra $150 or so. Rounding things out for today, if you're getting into PC gaming, then one of the big reasons to do that is gaming at high resolutions, higher refresh rates, and maybe even ultra-wide gaming, which is really cool. But you can't really do that unless you have a monitor that does that. So I have a handful of monitors to recommend to you guys today. This one from GIGABYTE, the M27Q, is only $270. It's 1440p, so 2560 by 1440, which is a nice step up from 1080 resolution. Also goes up to 170 Hertz, and it does have FreeSync and G-Sync compatibility, so you've got your variable refresh rate support there as well. Excellent 27-inch monitor option there. Also in the 27-inch range, we have this LG UltraGear monitor, the 27-inch 27G L83A-B, which has really good response time. This one's official NVIDIA G-Sync support, but also of course works with AMD FreeSync. Slightly lower refresh rate at 144 Hertz, but also slightly lower price at $250. And then here's a really sweet bang for the buck, the GIGABYTE M34WQ, which is a 34-inch ultra-wide. So 3440 by 1440 ultra-wide resolution, IPS, 1 millisecond response time, good color reproduction as well for a monitor at this price, and yeah, it's available for less than $325. Lastly, for anyone who's like, Paul, this all AMD build is cool and all, but I really like Intel and NVIDIA, I did a build just a week or two ago featuring Intel and NVIDIA. And although I was building with the 12900K, the 12900K you can actually find some pretty reasonable deals on right now, but I have this build, which I actually built for my contractor's nephew in a slightly different variation with the 13700K, listed in the video's description down below, so check that out if you want a slightly more expensive system that's going to feature the 13700K as well as an RTX 4070 Ti, which is an $800 graphics card. But that is all the time I have for today, so once again, check the video's description down below if you want to find links to all the parts and parts lists that I've been talking about today, and let me know the feedback you have down in the feedback section down below. For next month in November, would you guys be more interested in veering even more towards the budget side and trying to see what we can get for less than $1,000? Do you want to look for a high-end build that's like $2 to $3 grand? Any feedback you have or suggestions is more than welcome, so leave those comments down below. Also in the video's description, you can find a link to my store at paulshardware.net, where you can buy high-quality shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other merchandise to help support my channel. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you're not already. Thanks again for watching, you guys, and we'll see you all in the next video.